I'll be the first person to say it. I was not a great runner. I was terrible at that job because who wants to pick up cigarette butts? Like, nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to sweep the path after you've finished like your engineering degree. Literally nobody. And you don't understand the importance of the job of a runner until you move up. And when I did have the opportunity to move up, like it's always the same. You're always presented with some opportunity where you can prove yourself. And when that opportunity comes, you just have to seize it and take it.
Hey guys, and welcome back to the Audio Movers podcast. I'm your host, Mixed by Jocelyn, and as always, we've got Matt.
Hey, how you doing?
And we also have Igor.
Hey guys.
From Audio Movers, and today we have a brilliant guest. We've got Ramira Abraham.
Hey!
Let's jump straight into it, and we'll just go straight back from the beginning. But how did you get started in the music industry?
Okay, I'm trying to think of the way to make this short, but
We've got time.
My first sort of studio exposure was actually in Canada when I was doing my undergraduate degree, which was in Ottawa. And I did like a 1-year studio placement in Ottawa. And that was my first time I'd ever set foot in an actual recording studio. And I just remember kind of watching the engineer work. And it was the engineer was the guy that ran the studio as well. And I was effectively like a runner, sort of administrative person. But even from a distance back then, I was thinking I'd love to get more hands-on. I'd love to actually learn how to record things. And obviously that got set in the back of my mind after I'd done that year placement. I graduated uni, and then I came to London on holiday, actually, because I am Canadian. But I came around to visit some friends, and I came here to Abbey Road, to the gift shop, and to take the classic walking across the the crosswalk picture.
Bane of my life.
Yeah.
Cross that road.
Oh my God, I know.
You'll see an image of all of us doing it later.
It's so funny. And then now you see people taking pictures. You're like, oh, like, get out my way. Like,
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get to work. But anyways, I took my crosswalk picture, and then I saw that they had this institute, this program, Abbey Road Institute program, where they train up producers and engineers, and they teach you about sound engineering and recording, and songwriting and theory, etc. And I had done music my whole life from a performance perspective. So I'm like a classically trained pianist and a drummer, and also have been singing from a very young age. And again, off the back of that 1-year placement in university, I was like, oh, I need to be working in a studio. Like, this might be something really cool. So I applied for that program, just like thinking that nothing was going to come from it, to be honest. But 7 years later, here we are.
When you were you were a child and you were very musical from the sounds of things.
Yeah.
What sort of like, was it that internship or that placement that sort of flicked the switch when you were like, oh, actually not so into, I want to get in behind the desk? And, you know, what was the inspiration behind like becoming an engineer? You know, because it's not something that you're sort of, as a child, you're like,
you're not exposed to it.
You don't know anything about it.
Of course. I honestly, I never really saw myself in the spotlight from like the artist perspective.
Right.
And I guess in more so what the trigger was for me to go into engineering was like, you know, trying to figure out if there was a role for me in the industry where I could give valuable input to an artist that has like, that can be the face, where I don't have to be the face, but I can still give valuable musical input and be creative with them and develop relationships with people. And
be a part of like...
And be a part of the record. Exactly.
Yeah.
Be a part of the music without having to be the face of it, but still like playing a big role in it.
Right.
And actually the first time that I really felt, I guess, that sort of inspiration was partly at that internship. I think that was the first bit of exposure I had. But then after that, probably when I was studying, to be honest, and we'd have like guest lectures in here with other engineers and producers. And to be so real, I never really saw myself in a lot of the guest lectures that we would have come in. And so I thought, like, wouldn't it be cool if I could be that person?
Oh, I see. You didn't see yourself like represented there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I could see the role was there. And so I just kind of thought,
I can
do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. So you really like learnt your craft at the Abbey Road Institute?
Didn't know anything about engineering before I'd gone there.
Oh,
yeah,
right,
yeah,
okay.
yeah. Really.
How old are you?
22.
Okay.
21, 22
right.
when I started studying.
Right, and it was sort of like a leap of faith. You just decided I'm going to move because it's totally different country, you know.
Yeah, completely. And there was obviously like me having to do the whole student visa thing for 2 years, and then just visa stress, to be honest. But it was worth it because I really saw myself working in the London music industry specifically because, gosh, you guys have such a rich musical history and culture here. I didn't necessarily see myself coming up and starting my career in the US or Canada, to be honest. I kind of wanted a fresh start somewhere. And the London music scene is so diverse. There's so much to offer people. And it just felt like the right place.
Were you ever tempted to go to sort of LA and do that? Or
honestly, like, I'm more tempted now than I was when I started. I think to start out, LA is a really hard place to cut your teeth.
Competitive.
Yeah. I mean, it's competitive here too, but I feel like from what I have experienced anyways, the mindsets are a little bit different. I feel like people in London are so open to collaboration and like, as a young person coming in and learning the craft, like I just feel like maybe there's a bit more of an open reception.
Very strange. I feel like I've had like the opposite.
Really? Oh.
Yeah. And growing up here, I was born in Cumbria, but I grew up in London.
Yeah.
I feel like I've had the opposite, and like whenever I've gone and connected with any Americans, they've been like so open to
I would agree.
working.
I would agree.
Here it feels a little bit more like the doors are closed.
Wow, that's interesting. I definitely feel the opposite with America. Yeah, I feel like the doors are closed there. And I mean, I feel like in my head, I'm like, okay, let me just make a career for myself that's very London based first. And if I have the wonderful opportunity to like travel to the US and do work there, then that will be amazing. But still use London as a base.
Well, it's quite crazy that, I mean, for me, it's like studying with even the connection of Abbey Road is like the peak. So that must have been like, oh wow, this is like unreal. Like I decided I want to do this and I'm going to go to London and I'm going to study at Abbey Road Institute. Like that's amazing.
I never really thought of it that way, to be honest. But yeah, it was a big change for me to have made, but it seemed like as soon as I got accepted, I was like, I can't pass up this opportunity. I've got to make it work somehow. And just graft. And like, I didn't have any family here or anything, but
what was that like? Did you feel like maybe, I'm just thinking of like how I would feel in that situation, that maybe not having the family and stuff, obviously you remove all distractions so you can just purely focus on this craft.
I mean, it was harder than that for sure. I mean, I grew up with my dad, so I love spending a lot of time with him and moving. I mean, I was already moving away from home when I was in university in Canada, so it wasn't really a big change. Like I'm already used to being away from my family and not seeing them super often, but I guess this felt like a much bigger leap because I wasn't coming here for school. I mean, I was coming here for school, but it wasn't for university or anything. It was for something that I really felt like I had chosen for myself.
Yeah, passion. Yeah,
exactly. And there was a lot more pressure in my mind in the sense of I have to make this work. There's no plan B. I can't go back.
No.
I have to absolutely just.
And music's always one of those things, especially when you're dealing with family, where it's like I got to prove myself here. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
But you said like, but you're from quite a musical family. Was it like go and do it, or was it okay?
Yes, and a lot of my auntie, who is a really big inspiration to me as well. She's a music teacher. Everybody in my family is musical. My grandparents were very musical on both sides, and so I think I'm maybe the first person to sort of make a bigger career out of it, I think. But they were definitely there to lay the foundations for me, to inspire me to want to take that step in the first place. And of course, growing up with your whole family being musical and everyone playing instruments with you, like it's having a family band, it's a great vibe. And it really makes you feel like, oh, this is something I could do. But, and this is something they've always said to me, like you can't really go into it half-assed, really. You have to give it the full go. Fully commit to it. Again, that's that notion of having not.
And I suppose you were probably, I'm just assuming, like the first to sort of get into like the more technical side of things.
Yeah, the engineering side, definitely.
It was like a newer thing for them as well. Do you know what I mean? Obviously they know about it, but like none of them have trained in it.
Exactly. They know about it. They know what the job is, but
They're probably hoping you can go back and record all of them.
Actually, no, they hope I can go back and, you know, help them.
Their vocals,
Oh, God.
Is home like, where is home in Canada?
My family's based in Calgary.
Okay.
Yeah, in Alberta.
Is there like much of an industry there?
No. No, honestly, I think in terms of Canada, if you are wanting to enter the music industry, specifically from like an engineering perspective, I feel like Toronto or Vancouver is going to be the move.
Yeah.
That's not to say that there aren't jobs in other cities that exist. I'm sure there are. But I feel like maybe those might feel more of like a gateway to those big cities. Especially if you're wanting to work on like R&B, pop, like.
Yeah, and I feel like where Canada is so close to America, everyone, if you're Canadian into music, you sort of just go to America.
Yeah, you're going to go to LA for sessions.
Yeah,
you're going to meet people very easily because of the proximity, and people
Yeah.
are usually very happy when you
And like
say that you're
Toronto's
Canadian.
like an hour and a half flight to New York.
New York,
You can-
exactly,
yeah.
exactly. Very easy. Like I know lots of Toronto-based musicians and artists who frequently are just living between US
Yeah.
and Canada. So
Yeah, I was in Toronto a few months ago, and I was like,
Oh, yeah,
I
you
can't
say.
feel the scene. I don't know, like, you know, there's only seems to be like a handful of studios here. It doesn't feel like, but to me, it's like makes sense that, you know, you, especially with like people like Drake being like,
yeah,
you know, flag the whole like Toronto proud. You know?
Yeah.
You'd feel like maybe it built up a bit more. Maybe it has, but
I think it has since Drake has obviously become the big thing.
Yeah.
But more so, I would say The Weeknd.
Oh yeah, of
Justin
course.
Bieber,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
you've got
yeah.
these big Tate McRae is Canadian.
Yeah,
She's
so
from
you
Calgary.
forget
Yeah, you
from the
forget.
outside. You just think
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
American.
yeah,
like,
yeah. I know,
you what I mean?
I
Yeah.
know. But I mean,
Also,
there's-
like Toronto's over the water from Chicago and Detroit. It's
Yeah.
like two most legendary music cities
Yeah,
of the world. So it's kind of
totally.
like it's always going to be the little brother a little bit,
Yeah.
you know. of,
Yeah.
like,
When
I
yeah,
feel that
Chicago.
way. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But like in like the last 10 years, if you think of like the music that's come out, it's like Canadians have actually kind of dominated, I think.
At the very top,
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
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 So going to the future now, or now, present. Yeah, where are you working now?
I'm freelance now. My body floats between different studios depending on the artist I'm working with and the kind of nature of the job, really.
Yeah.
But I do a lot of work with Platoon, who are an artist services company and a distribution company. And we're based up in Talyard, beautiful, massive new studios. I've been working there as a freelancer for the better part of 2 years now.
Right.
And
Oh, I just missed you. I used to work there a few years.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Whereabouts?
I was in Charlie Sloth's studio. He had his
Okay.
place, you know where the cafe is?
Yes.
Like just above there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, it's a really cool hub to
It's
meet
very
people.
it's quite communal.
Yeah.
Space.
Yeah, and I like that feel about it. Although I have to say, I think us, the Platoon studio crew, we kind of keep to ourselves because the studios are busy. Like we have 3 big studios where we record their artists, which is a very different approach to how I came up in the industry, which is working for a commercial studio,
Yeah.
where basically if you pay the fee to be in the studio, you get the room. But at Platoon, because they're that artist services company, their studios are not really for commercial use. They're for the artists that are signed with them and that have deals with them. And it's a big asset for those artists and they're so grateful coming in to be able to use the studios with engineers that kind of get the projects. You build the rapport with an engineer like myself and my counterpart Taylor. And between her and I, we share like the bigger engineering projects. But
Yeah.
because we build a relationship with the label's artists, it's like, you know, I'm texting them, they're like reacting to my Instagram stories or whatever. We're just talking about the music that's going to come out, and I can follow up with them and just have a nice relationship
Where
with
you
them.
build more of a relationship, and that's
Yeah.
always going to be better for the end product.
Of course, I totally agree.
Because then the next time they come to the studio, it's like being in the room with a friend.
Yeah,
you know?
pull up that song that we were working on 3 months ago,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, which you don't necessarily get working at a commercial studio, where it's just kind of, it feels a little bit more one in, one out,
Yeah, of course.
different thing every
Yeah,
day.
yeah.
You don't have a relationship with those people. You just kind of
Yeah, they're on to the next big project.
Exactly.
before you left
Yeah,
the door.
yeah. Unless you're like working on an album or there's a
Mm.
long booking. So
What do you think about that sort of? Because you came up in that. You know, in the UK, it's funny we're talking about UK versus LA. In the UK, that's still what a lot of people do, right? You know, there's these famous studios. You'll try and get a job as a runner or, you know, at the bottom and kind of work your way up.
Mm-hmm.
And you did something similar, right? I mean, what do you feel about one versus the other? Like trying to kind of the studio system, if you like, versus something different. I don't know.
What would the something different be?
Probably my entrance into the like
What was your entrance?
well, I just sort of like forced it and I made my own studio.
Well, good. Yeah.
Like I wasn't like a runner for a big studio
Mm-hmm,
or I didn't have like a massive sort of like what would you call them, like a you know, a mentor or anything
Okay.
like that.
Yeah, you get people who just like they start. I mean,
I lied my way in.
yeah. also, you get people where like they start. You have a group of friends. I mean, Derek Ali sort of described it as like you have a group of friends.
Yeah.
One of you's the rapper, one of you makes beat, and one of you's okay. I guess I'm going to be the engineer.
Yeah.
You just
Oh,
figure out-
dang.
That's more.
You figured out. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a mixed opinion, to be honest. I think at the end of the day, right, it doesn't matter how you get to where you want to go, I would say. But the difference in going one route versus the other, I would say, is just maybe your approach and what you might learn and the knowledge
you're
you gain.
exposed to high-end polished products right from the beginning.
Yeah.
Like I went from, you know, working on like a little test cam audio thing and my speakers being on a glass table and knowing no different. You know what I mean? And that's how it started.
But
so the learning curve's a lot longer, you know? That's genuine. Like, that's what it was.
I mean, I honestly, I feel like the learning curve is probably similar, just different in that sense.
Yeah.
Like there's a benefit to you just figuring it out for yourself. By like working on something, then you decide, oh, maybe it's not the best idea for me to have my speakers on a glass table, you know?
No, yeah. Bad habits.
Yeah, but also as someone that's coming up in the more traditional sense, where you're like a runner and then an assistant working your way up to an engineer, it's more like you watch. I sit in the room as an assistant, anyways, with other engineers, and I watch what they do, and I pick up their habits. Like a lot of the stuff that I record now, I think is probably very similar to how some of my engineering mentors at Metropolis would mic up stuff, for example.
Yeah.
Because you you come up in the industry with that equipment that's in that room.
Yes.
And you learn how those things sound and how those rooms sound, and you kind of develop a bias towards those things. And I see it in myself as well. Like I go into a studio and if they have big room shaking Genelecs in there, I'm like, yes, this is exactly what I want. Whereas, you know, at Platoon we have some beautiful ATCs. I think that's what we got here as well. Yes.
Yeah.
The exact same ATCs. And I'm like, they're so brilliant, they're so beautiful, but it's not the same as those Genelecs.
Yeah,
you know, you kind of develop that.
Yeah. Well, everyone has a preference. You know?
Yeah.
I'm like, I actually, you know, not speaking bad about any speaker company because they're all great, but like, my personal preference is not Genelec. Like if I walk into a room, I'm like, oh no, you know. But that's just like what I'm used to. You know what I mean?
I love that. Okay.
Like it's just like I feel like my ears like get tired quickly.
Yeah. Okay.
But,
yeah.
just not like they don't sound they sound great, but I feel like I get ear fatigue much faster.
I feel you. I get that. But see, it's because you know what works for you, as opposed to I know what works for me because that's like the first thing I was ever exposed to, and I learned to love that. In
the traditional sense, like as sort of you've come up in the industry in I would say a traditional way, but being so you know, you're a very driven person, and you clearly wanted success and you know bypass some of those stepping stones. What's it like trying to you know, compete against that sort of like I don't want to say archaic, but like you know,
no, I get it.
You're a runner for this long, and you're not gonna you might become an assistant. And the only time you're gonna get an opportunity
make tea
when,
for the first year.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, how do you sort of like, you know, fast track that, or like how did you approach it?
It's, to be honest, it was kind of calculated. I knew from the beginning I was going to be a runner, and I knew what I needed to gain from that experience. And I'll be the first person to say it. I was not a great runner. I was terrible at that job, because who wants to pick up cigarette butts? Like, nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to sweep the path after you've finished like your engineering degree. Literally nobody. And you don't understand the importance of the job of a runner until you move up. And when I did have the opportunity to move up, like it's always the same. You're always presented with some opportunity where you can prove yourself. And when that opportunity comes, you just have to seize it and take it like,
You have to be ready. Yeah.
have to be super ready.
You have to prove beyond what they want.
Exactly,
want
which is
from you,
which is exactly what happened. Like my first assisting session was by accident because they couldn't find cover. And then what ended up happening was actually the engineer himself didn't even turn up. So I was sat there in the room with AJ Tracy, my first session as an engineer, and he was like, yo, like, where's this engineer? I'm ready. Like, let's just go. I'm going to go in the booth. And I was like, okay, cool, like, and I just went on the computer and I just was engineering the session. As a runner, being asked to assist and then coming on as an engineer, like, that's a big step, but you have to be so ready. And that's what your degree is prepping you for, really.
Yeah, and there's an element of like, because just you saying it with it being with AJ Tracy, like that would be, I've met him and I know him as well, and he's probably like an ideal artist to have. As
such a solid guy.
Yeah, because, and he's not like super like on it and like, no, where's my engineer? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's just like, dude, I just want to record this
Exactly.
too.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, let's
chill.
go.
So I was
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
great, I'm not going to, what am I going to do? Call my manager and be like,
let's go.
That's not the
Yeah.
move.
And
So-
he would have appreciated that.
Yeah, I
you
think
know?
so. Hope so. Hey,
Yeah,
AJ.
yeah.
Yeah, and I've forgotten what your question was.
It was how you moved up and like prioritized
Right,
it because
yeah.
there's I know assistant engineers and runners and stuff that are doing it well into their like late 20s and like they're like, I'm still doing this, and a lot of them end up sort of phasing out of it. They're like, I'm not getting where I want to be, and the passion's lost for it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I get that. And I think the second part to answer your question is like, A, being ready when your opportunity presents itself to prove yourself, and then B, knowing when you've reached your peak at that specific place and when is the right time for you to sort of take what you know and then go do something else. And that step is really big and it's really hard. But you kind of hit a ceiling as an assistant in a commercial studio, because once you have assisted for a few years and you know the rooms like the back of your hand and you know the people and the engineers so well, it's like, well, I have to wait for one of the other engineers to quit in order for me to move up, which is not ideal. And that's where you start to feel really stuck.
And there's a confidence thing as well to it, because it's like they are different roles,
Yeah.
and it's like, do you ever feel ready to sit in the seat? I feel like you're going to get people that are always going to question their ability, and there's other people that are going to be like, I was ready yesterday.
Yeah, exactly,
You know what I mean?
exactly.
So,
And I think you have to, no matter how hard it is, harness that confidence in some form and be like, no, I can do this. I can either pick up my skills from this job as an assistant, for example, and take them elsewhere as a freelancer, or like, as soon as another opportunity comes along for me to engineer a project with someone that I'd been working with on the side when I was like a runner, for example, take that, step into the bigger role, even though you might be taking on like something completely new. You might have to, there's a big learning curve, but at some point there's going to be a learning curve.
yeah, and there's a hierarchy to it.
Yeah.
I mean, that you have to sort of follow, and
For yourself,
I suppose,
yeah.
and like the guys that are sitting in the hot seat at that moment, they're like, well, I had to do all of this,
Exactly.
so you're doing it too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And honestly, like, it takes that learning curve, that big jump, and you learning from an experience to actually take you to the next level. And I really believe that you won't get
Throw
to that
yourself in the
point
deep
without
end.
it. Exactly. And then it's sink or swim.
But what was the ambition? Because was it to work with specific artists? Was it to have more responsibility? To become more of a producer? Was it to, obviously you became a vocal producer? What was kind of like your North Star where you're like, that's where I'm trying to get to? I don't want to pick up the cigarette butts because I want to do,
That was such a dead job, honestly. Being a runner, being an assistant was great. I can exactly pinpoint what that moment was. because after I'd finished sort of running, I started assisting during COVID, and that's when we were doing the Little Mix albums, or the studio was doing the Little Mix albums. And I, being a pop and R&B gal, working at Metropolis was, the place to be, because a lot of those artists were going there, Little Mix included. And you'd have like, obviously the greats, Nick Cave and Warren Ellis and Elton John, and they were coming through too. But you'd have like the Whiz Kids, the P2Js, the Miss Banks, the Rays, they were all sort of coming through at that time. And I loved being around other female artists, and working with Little Mix was sort of my first real exposure to that. I actually had to ask to switch sessions on one week when they were starting the Little Mix stuff, because I was like, that is so my bag. And I was so nervous to ask my studio manager. I was like sweating. I had to pee 3 times before I went in to ask to speak to them. And I was like, please, like, I really think I'd do a really good job on this session. Like, please, can I be on it with Paul this week? Paul is the chief engineer at Metropolis. And they were like, oh yeah, cool. Yeah, no problem. I was like, why was I so nervous?
Overthinking it.
Yeah, but that's what happens. And then kind of being in the room with them and watching their vocal producers and their vocal coaches work with them, I saw Paul, the engineer, doing a brilliant job, as he always does. And I saw their vocal coaches and the vocal producers. They had like Camille, Emanike, Trey Jean-Marie, Rafaela did a lot of the vocal production for those 2 albums. And I kind of was sitting in the back of the room the whole time across work, assisting those 2 albums. And I was thinking, I can do what he's doing, and I can do what she's doing. What's stopping me from combining those 2 roles and just them having, like, an artist having one person that coaches and arranges and writes vocals and
taking some of the chaos out of the session.
Exactly. Yeah. And like someone having one person do that job kind of removes a little bit of the disconnect that you might have between one person who's the vocal coach or the vocal producer, and one person who has the engineering knowledge. And I'm a vocalist myself, so I really felt like I could take those opportunities and just like combine them into one job. Now, I'm not saying I'm obviously not the first person to do that job, because I was also assisting people like Cameron Gower-Poole, who's an incredible vocal producer as well, who I looked up to in those like sort of formative years as well. And so having watched him work in some sessions, I've seen it be possible. And then I go into these other sessions where it was a little bit more like pop and R&B driven with like mainly female artists. And I'd be like, I would be such a good vibe if I was sitting in that chair. And I could contribute a lot, but I have to figure out a way to get myself there, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, so you combining those roles. So what was sort of like the moment that happened for you, where you sort of were sitting in the chair and you were like, oh, I've done this?
It started with smaller independent artists. I was obviously like, as an assistant or a runner at a commercial studio, you get downtime, which is like, I mean, it's recommended. You just capitalize on that, because you get to use a studio for free when it's not being used for a session. And you get to, that's a great way for you to learn the room. So when your time comes and that opportunity to like do your AJ Tracey session comes, you're ready. You know the room already. And so in those sort of downtimes, I was recording Matt Taylor. And, it's a beautiful journey that he and I have had together, because we both started from scratch from the beginning together. And I've watched him grow into like this amazing artist. And I've sort of helped along the way, and he's helped me grow as well as a vocal producer. But we've been working with each other from the beginning. And I had a few artists like that, that I had started working with. And because we had a relationship already, and like what I had started as like his engineer. And then we kind of learned from working on several sessions together that I have more valuable input to give as a vocalist as well. And that's how that relationship.
You just sort of start giving your opinion, like almost.
They ask for it. Artists ask for it. And, I never, when I'm purely engineering in a session. Like I got to know my role. I never step outside of those lines unless they ask. Because if suddenly they're like, so what do you think about that take? Or like, what do you think about this comped together with the last take that I did? And I'll be like, do you really want to know my opinion? I always sort of like bridge the gap with that. And then they're like, yeah, please. Like, it's good because
Is that
it's
because
just
of your
me
brutal
and-
honesty?
No, it's just more like
Maybe
you
go
want-
home, come back tomorrow.
Yeah.
No, not at all. I mean, I try to do it in the sweetest way possible, to be honest, because it's just more like, do you want to open that conversation together?
And artists are sensitive,
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah.
Especially when they're in the booth, like the mic is in front of their face already. Like,
And I think a lot of the time they know if they're not performing very well.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So they're sort of asking for your help.
my typical line is like, are you asking me because you know you could have done that better? You know, like, is that what you're asking?
We should do another take.
Mm.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Does it take a long time to build up that rapport? I mean, obviously, so Matt is a frequent collaborator. You've been on a journey together, but like, if you got thrown into a room with someone you'd never worked with before, and potentially they're a big name, do you start from very small, or are you like, no, they're a pro, I'm going to tell them, like, let's try that line again? Or
If I'm in the room just as an engineer, you mean, and I'm trying to show them that I can help a little bit more.
so if you were there as a vocal producer,
Oh, right.
because there's one thing, I mean, because there's people who just track and they're just like, they're almost, in the best possible way, they're invisible.
Yeah.
They just press an R.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the artist is hearing, and maybe there's takes being, playlisted and but as far as the artist is concerned, it's like, it's seamless, which is very different from, when I've seen what you've done with Matt, where you're kind of going, maybe that word, you try it a bit more like this, that,
Okay, I get it now. Sorry. So like with a brand new artist and I'm vocal producing them for the first time, you ask certain questions to gauge where their head is at and how comfortable they are. I can gauge how comfortable they are with me. And if I need to break the ice further, like I'll suggest we step out of the studio environment and like have a coffee in the lounge or whatever and just talk about the song we're working on and like what was the inspiration for this and just get them to trust me. And that's the biggest thing really, because once that bridge is crossed, then that's it. Like we're on the journey of recording this track.
Do you ever find yourself like singing the lines with them?
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely.
And that kind of then helps build a trust because they understand that like the palette or whatever.
Yeah. Well, so to add on to that, which is interesting, I do a lot of vocal arrangement when I am producing. And with a first-time client, I will get them to send me the demo with like their demo vocal on it, whatever, and I cut my own voice on top with an arrangement.
Right.
And some like idea ad-libs and like I heavily tune myself, stacks, exactly. So they can get excited about the track again before they head into the studio with me.
You're reinventing.
Exactly.
Right.
And they can like sometimes artists just need a little bit of a trigger in their minds to be like, oh my gosh, I didn't hear that before, but now that she's doing it, I think we should do that. Or like,
sense,
I'm hearing it go in this direction now. But it's also in a subtle way, me showing them like, look, you were singing to me. You're going to be singing to me all day, but I'm not afraid to show you that I can, like, I'll be singing with you too.
Yeah.
Like it's both of us being
I'm
vulnerable.
a professional. We can do this together.
Yeah.
We'll get the best out of the track.
We'll get the best out of it together.
Do you ever get like, if you've done that, obviously you're putting your artistic like imprint on the song.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever get like any situations where maybe the vocalist doesn't or the artist doesn't like the arrangement that you've done?
Yeah.
Like how do you approach that?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, sometimes they might be like, oh, you took it in like a little more of an R&B direction, but I was hearing it go more with this reference. And I'll be like, oh, okay, I get it. I see what you mean now. My bad. But then, they might say like, I liked what you did in the verses, but maybe we can change it to do this. Like it's always just an open collaboration and just that sort of openness environment.
And being honest. And I suppose there's a skill. It's probably something that you can't explain of like being able to communicate with an artist like that.
Yeah.
And having that skill set is something probably that you're more born with than that what you can like develop maybe.
I think it's hard to teach for sure, but I think you learn it for like definitely on the job. And it's something you learn as an assistant watching other engineers communicate with vocalists, because then you watch them and you think, as a vocalist, like would I want someone to say it like that, phrase that like that to me or something, you know? And you just sort of learn the tone that you need to be using. And as you learn and record someone's character, you can gauge how cheeky you can be with them, how funny you can be, how honest you can be. If you need to, sometimes I need to just be a hype woman. Like that's my whole job, and then I can get a performance out of them. That was
sick.
And go. Exactly. Let's go. Like you're a professional. Like let's just do this.
Yeah, keeping the energy high.
Exactly. And sometimes I have to do a lot more like, you know, singing with them. There are times when I've stood up in the control room and I'm staring at them through the glass, and we're like yelling together. We're yelling together.
Yeah, that's funny. Because I'm always trying to explain that like to my family. They don't really know. They just think, oh, you're just like the nerdy guy behind the desk, sort of like recording. And whenever like an engineer is portrayed in like a film, it's always like the quiet guy in the room. But I'm like, it's actually not like that at all. Like you have to be so sort of like open, and you have to be able to read people and you know what I mean? And
100%.
Yeah, and change sort of like, you know, if you're in a bad mood, you can't be in a bad mood. Like you've got to figure a way of getting the artist out of the bad mood. Yeah, exactly.
For sure.
Yeah.
And that's a really cool way of putting it, actually. Just like the fact that we always see engineers being sort of silent and in the background. And that's kind of how it felt when I was an assistant too. Obviously, as an assistant, you're even more in the background. But even I would watch some of the engineers just almost be... obviously they can read people very well, so they're just flying through Pro Tools without having to say much. But sometimes you can see that the artist might want a little bit more from them. They want there to be a bit more give and take. Yeah, exactly. And I think I can have like a little bit of a big personality sometimes as well. And I always felt, coming up in the traditional sense, that I had to sort of hide that. But now that I'm freelancing and an engineer and producing artists, I'm really embracing it,
putting it as part of your brand, and it's like a selling point. Yeah.
Exactly.
Because there are like situations where like I've been in a room where it's like the artist just wants to look at you, and the engineer knows, oh, I need to make 2 tracks and pan them left and right. They don't want to have the discussion. Like it's just, we're doing this now.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
We're doing this now.
Yeah. But you know, for me, that's never been something that I've enjoyed. But I guess that's how some people work. But
yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, not my bag. Talking a bit more on like the technical side of things, like obviously being a vocal producer, when it comes to recording vocals, say we're doing like a singer, not so much a rapper, like what would be your like go-to chain for something like that?
I mean, I do have a go-to chain, which is a 251 into a 1081 into a CL1B, and then just straight into Pro Tools. But I don't always start with that. That's my go-to for a lot of things, but I do my research and I listen to what the artists sound like beforehand, and I sort of try to preempt based on their genre and their style what their voice might suit best. Yeah, it's not always a 251. It's not always a 47. Sometimes in some situations it's been like a FET 47 for those really dynamic, like a Lewis Capaldi type singer, really kind of like guttural, throaty, dynamic. Yeah, it does depend, but you do have to do your research, or I find I have to do my research a lot. But obviously that's because at Platoon I'm spoiled for choice. Right. I've got these mics to my disposal, but if at the end of the day, if I don't have those things, I'm going to do the best job I can with what I have.
Yeah. Do you sometimes feel like having too much is like a hindrance to
it? Never. You can never have too much.
Right. I quite like to be like restricted when I'm working. I don't know, if I feel like I've got too much, I'm just going to spend ages like, okay, let's line up like 4 mics and do a take, and I'm like, and then I'm second guessing myself when they're like, okay, I'm limited, just we're going to use this mic and we're going to figure it out.
I get that. I get that feeling as well. If I do test mics and stuff, I'll do it usually before the artist actually gets there. Yeah. And I'll try to maybe like sing into it the way they would sing into it, or if I have the track beforehand, especially, I can sing along to it, just ad lib over stuff with a different chain and just go from mic to mic, and then I'll decide like, no, this sits better in the mix for everything. Yeah.
So as maybe a dumb question, but to what extent do vocalists sort of come in with this is my chain, this is how I want things, because in like hip hop, what tends to happen quite a lot is
they got the chain.
They will have their chain, and if they're guesting on a track, it can become a bit complicated because they want their voice to always sound
sold the idea though.
That's the thing. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
And they're like, because it's the engineer trying to keep the work right.
Yeah.
Sure.
So it's like,
only I know.
This is the chain that you need. Like,
No, trust.
I have the one microphone left in the world that can capture your voice. Like this.
So annoying. That is what happens sometimes. But you can tell. See, that's exactly it. You can tell when you can. Perhaps manipulate is the wrong word, but sway them in another direction when someone comes to me and they're like, yeah, my chain is, I don't know, like a 58 through the desk. And I'm like,
yeah, that's like an ick for like to get told that.
well, it kind of, I can tell when there's wiggle room or not. Like I know going into some
with their
session.
body language and how they say it to you, sort of thing.
Well, no, just what the chain is. Like I can tell if someone has told them that.
Oh, I see.
From whatever the chain is. But if
generic chain sort of
or generic, like I'm going to a Pirate Studios chain, you know, like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. You're like, oh, cool, it turns on. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I only record into a Scarlett.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
I just had some fun. Yeah, turn up and you're like, oh, this is the problem we're solving today.
Yeah.
I like to use my Scarlett interface.
Yeah.
Okay, can you do
Yeah.
The Scarlett
contact
interface-
mic into a Scarlett. Yeah.
this. See what I mean? Like we're laughing about it, but if someone turned up like that and they came here, for example, and they said, "Oh yeah, this is my chain." Usually, you would be like, "Yeah, you."
Well, you just say, "Well, wait until you hear this chain." Like,
That's usually what I.
Yeah,
like, oh, okay. Well, you're gonna have a good day.
Sometimes I just straight up lie and I'm like, oh, we haven't got that, but I've got this up. Why don't you try it and let me know how it sounds? And literally 9 times out of 10, they'll stand in front of the mic and be like, that's cool. Yeah, it sounds great. Wow.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And then you have to sort of expose them to a different world of possibilities.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And a larger bank account. Most of the time.
Oh, it's not my bank account, but it's someone's. So, yeah.
Yeah.
But that's interesting. Before you saying, sorry, just that thing you were saying before about because you're potentially sometimes playing them like a guide track or with like guide vocals on, so that's kind of getting them into the vibe as well. And presumably you're doing. I don't know, like if there's delay or reverb on the vocal, you're demonstrating a possibility to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool,
That's interesting actually. Like, from just being ignorant when it comes to like singers and like vocal production. What is your approach when it comes to sort of like in-session effects? Like, obviously, are you trying to like print that stuff down and lock it down before it goes to be mixed? Or are they all ideas and you try to keep it like fluid?
I do try to keep it as fluid as possible, but I do have effects on when we are recording, and they're the basic stuff. Usually like some sort of doubler, some high-end sparkly stuff. Oh my God, delay, reverb.
With things like that, are you keeping that more in the box so it can be removed and changed?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, not using like, any old school.
A lexicon or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, I have on a few occasions, but it depends on the genre, really.
Right.
There have been like a handful of scenarios where I've been like, this Valhalla won't cut it today. I think I want to try the Bricasti on this person's voice. Or like when I'm recording a choir, it's usually out of the box. I'm usually using a Bricasti for a choir.
Right, yeah.
Just because I feel like it
you're capturing the vibe then and
yes,
there, and
exactly.
you don't want that to change.
No.
Yeah,
so a very different kind of story. Whereas if I'm recording like a solo artist, I know that track is like the vocals are going to go to somebody else afterwards.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's just going to change. But I always send a wet stem over to...
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, because I normally like, if I'm mixing a singer for whatever reason, it's rare, but I do. It's mostly rap, but I'll always kind of say to the producer, oh, can you send me like all of the harmonies and ad-libs wet? Because I want the main vocal dry, because I want to be able to like position
Change
it in the way that I want to position it. But like, I love what you've done with all these effects, and sometimes they go crazy, like pitch shifting and stuff like that, and I'm like, half being lazy, like that's going to take me too long to figure out how you do that.
Yeah, so just send me how you did. But also you have to keep in mind that that's probably what the artist is used to listening to now.
Yeah, of course,
And if you change it too much or you don't get it just
they're
right,
like, what?
they're going to be like, what is this mix, bro? Like, ugh.
Yeah, because it can change the depth and
yeah,
stuff so much.
totally.
Yeah, even just like a few seconds off on like a tail of a reverb. Oh, that's cool.
Another potentially dumb question. I'm going to be asking a lot of dumb questions today, clearly.
Oh.
But if you're like out the box with effects, does that affect your ability to comp vocals and kind of glue bits together and things like that? Or
No, doesn't really affect me. It's more so the effects are just there to set the atmosphere and the environment of where the vocal sits. And
Sure.
whatever the vocal comp is or the performance ends up being is like, I don't know, gonna be it. Regardless of what the effects are.
yeah, okay.
What might change it is if we're belting a part versus like singing a part in a soft head voice, or like seeing how much energy is given into the actual vocal track. If that comp is going to change, then I might tweak the effects a little bit around that. But otherwise, not really.
What is your sort of approach when it comes to comping? We were talking about it a little bit earlier off camera, and you was like, that's a good question. So
I love comps.
right. See, you know, when we talked about this off camera, I thought you were going to go the opposite way.
No. I'm Miss Compy Comp all over the place. Like
How detailed do you go?
Details.
You like syllables?
Oh yeah, but it's because the artists that I work with you've made me a monster. Because they come in and they're like, oh no, not that breath, not that S at the end. Can you gain up that plosive just because I can't hear it in the context of things? So like it's made me picky, but I think I'm better for it because, you know, I tune into these things even though the artist doesn't clock onto it. And I don't know, sometimes that's maybe a bad thing.
The genre that you work in, I think it's like pop and R&B they're such polished genres.
Yes.
You know, there's no the error in the record doesn't bring a feeling to it.
Yeah.
That's not what it's.
That's not it.
Do.
Yeah. That's not the vibe at all. Like it has to be perfection.
Yeah.
Vocal performance has to be perfection, and like that's kind of how I go into all the sessions, hoping to come out with like I have a vision of what the vocal needs to be in my head, and I know by the end of the day if we've met that or not. I mean, usually what I like to do so that the artist is comfortable as well and kind of gets on board with me is that I comp with them. Like what I'll do is I'll do a comp of the lead vocal once we've finished recording it. And then I play it to them and I'm like, you listen to this comp I've done and you just say, I like that or I hate it in parts. Right. You take notes. If you're like the in verse 2 sucks, change that.
Yeah.
That's what I want from them. But it also I feel like they might also feel like they're getting their money's worth out of me at that point too, because they just get to sit back and not go listen to themselves take by take.
Yeah, and you're showing the level of dedication and detail that you're putting into it as well.
And in some cases, they're like, okay, I have a lot of notes. And I'll be like, okay, cool, then let's get into it. You come up and sit with me, and then we're going to go through everything so that I can get your vision right.
Do you normally do that in the same day, or are they like different sessions?
Same day, because I like to comp the lead vocal, and then we cut all the BBs to the lead.
Right, so you get that perfect, and then you'll build from there. I suppose, because
at least 90%.
A word pronounced slightly differently could change the whole way that you would, stack that BV or whatever it is.
Or at least in the chorus, like sometimes I'm pressed for time, and if I've worked with the artist for a long time, they'll just be like, "No, I trust you, just do it." But can we get the hook right? And then we'll cut all the BVs and the ad libs to a comped section.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of blown away. I saw a clip of you kind of doing this, and you were doing, and it really was like sort of micro precision. It was with Matt Taylor. I mean, I'm sort of guessing. I mean, it seemed like he had a really strong sense of his own voice and what he was trying to do. But I can imagine with a lot of singers, I mean, the level of detail you're going into, I just can't imagine that you kind of go snowblind of like, oh, that word in that take versus that word. Like, are they like to be that tuned in and hear? Like, I couldn't really hear it. I was like, sounds good to me.
Yeah,
yeah.
like
Third
like
take also sounded good,
is
you know?
someone like you say like Matt Taylor, and then like if you compare them to a group like Little Mix, like is the level of like
Yes.
detail
The same.
the same?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I suppose because they get so used to hearing themselves so crystal clear,
Mm-hmm.
and then when they you know it's a big reality check, especially with a band like that came up through like what was it,
X Factor.
X Factor. So they're like, you know,
It's all about the voice.
megastars instantly,
Mm-hmm.
and now they're like, okay, everything I do has to be perfect, you know.
I can't speak for them, to be honest. I don't really know what that feels like. But I can imagine that, yeah, kind of being thrust into the stardom like that, you might have
It would
that
make
in
you,
your, it would make you
double
just-
take everything, overthink everything. Surely, yeah.
and also you put a lot of in that position. I can imagine you put a lot of trust into your producers, a lot of trust. So they also kind of develop a workflow and like how they like to do their vocals, for example. And obviously I still work a lot with Matt Taylor, who is now operating under a different artist name, Altara. We're still working on stuff together, and I also work really closely with Jade from Little Mix, and I like both of them are.
Yeah.
It's precision,
Right.
but it's the same for a lot of artists. It's very rare. In fact, it works the opposite way with artists sometimes, where I'll say like, oh, that sounds like mint. It sounds amazing. What do you think? And then they'll be like, well, like I can't really hear the differences between this and that, and then I have to almost play it back to them and then show them what the other options were, and then tune them into what the.
Or maybe you shouldn't have said anything in the first place.
Well, if they're curious, I like to show them. I like to show them
yeah.
because it's their vocal, and at the end of the day, if they're not confident with the job I've done the job I've done and putting it out, then it's not gonna be out.
How do you? One thing I'm interested in. Sorry, Ego.
No, go ahead.
All right. You next. Elbow my way in. I'm just this thing with like pop vocals as someone who's kind of outside that world is that balance of people who have a very distinct voice. You know, you think of like a Rihanna or someone like that, and in a split second you can hear their voice on radio. You're like, and that's so crucial to become a megastar, right? But then it seems to me that maybe that clashes a little bit with the precision kind of melodyne auto-tune vocal, where sometimes it's like I can tell some artists
You're
struggle.
removing the character.
Yeah, you sort of struggle to tell the difference sometimes with some singers. It's like some people their voice is just distinct.
Yeah, especially like with a group as well. Like I would struggle to know who was singing in what in Little Mix, but maybe that's just because I'm not listening to a lot of Little Mix.
You're not a mixer.
Nah, but like, no, but yeah, secretly. No, my fiance is, and she was very excited when she found out that you work with Little Mix. And she was like, oh
that's
my
so
God, that's
sweet.
Crazy. Like, and it's just like listening to all the songs, and I'm like, yeah.
I guess so. To try and turn it into a question is, are you conscious of that? Of like, I'm working with an artist, and they need to have a distinctive voice, and by voice I mean like identity, right? But we're doing this kind of pop, precision,
hyper focus polish.
Like how do you balance the two?
I think that really occurs more so with independent artists that I work with, not so much the ones signed to a major or kind of that have a little bit more of a track record, let's say.
Yeah, they've already sort of
a
built their
reputation.
sound. Yeah,
Exactly. But I get what you're saying, and I think I'm more in that scenario with independent artists because they're still trying to find that sound. And part of that might be, this is kind of a lot of the reason why people come to me as well, is kind of to help develop what that vocal identity is going to be. You can't change how your voice sounds drastically when you're singing if you're wanting to. Like, I don't think that's something you should force. Like, I have to make myself sound super unique by like sounding really throaty or like grunt. You know, I don't think that
Yeah, what comes out naturally.
what comes out naturally should be you, but it's going to be the style of production, the way that you kind of have your vocal inflections when you sing. It's going to be your storytelling through your writing that's going to set you apart, if that's the case. If you're like,
yeah, that's interesting. The writing side of things.
yeah, exactly. Like
how you structure the verse and things.
and a lot of times backing vocals, ad libs. Like if you're wanting to stand out amongst the crowd as an independent artist doing pop music, like it's obviously very difficult, but I think that you really have to lean into the writing aspect and just your sound in general. If you feel personally that your voice isn't necessarily like a unique standout. And I feel that way about myself too, which is why I end up doing a lot of backing vocal arrangements, because I feel like my stylistic choices and like my personality kind of comes out the best way via that avenue. And I think everybody has something that makes them unique. You just need to find it. It might not necessarily be the way your voice sounds like a Rihanna or like a Lewis Capaldi, but you know, that's obviously very clear cut, and that's something that they've trained in and they're born with to a degree. But do you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah, totally.
everybody has.
You hear yourself in the records that you produce.
A lot of the time, yeah.
Yeah.
And you know what's interesting? I never did before, but someone came and told me, my friend Lisa, who's also an artist, she was like, the song is so Romera. Like, this arrangement is so you. And I was like, what do you mean? What do you mean so me? And she's like, you have a sound. Like, you got a signature and it's this. And then I've listened back to some of the stuff I've worked on, and I was like, oh, yeah, crap. Like, I guess I do that a lot.
I think
or
that's
I
really
guess
good, though.
Yeah,
Like,
but you don't realize
Yeah.
that you kind of have that touch. And I think a lot of artists, when they put out their own music, they might not realize that actually there's part of it that's, you know, that's unique as well.
It
They
lives
just-
within like the producers and the engineers.
Exactly.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, 100%. I don't think that is actually like ever really discussed.
Yeah.
But apart from like on like really like, you know, obviously Dre, everyone's like, oh, he has
yeah.
a sound.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But I think if you work in the industry long enough, everyone develops their own
For sure.
like signature print. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
You had a good question actually about.
Well, sorry, because I cut across you, Igor.
Yeah,
What
it
were you
slipped away.
yeah, no, go for it.
No, I just was wondering, like, do you prefer like another take or comp in, or like how do you decide between like these two things? Like, like when do you get the decision? Oh, I'm probably gonna take another take.
It's a
or
good question.
I will fix it later.
Fix
or,
it
like,
later.
everything's like perfect, and then finessing the perfectness with like I make it even more.
Right, you'd rather get them
Yeah,
to
yeah.
do the whole thing again
like,
than like.
Yeah, you feel like,
take
oh, you
in,
know
yeah.
what? Maybe you can sing this word like, again.
So I take notes while we're recording, and I just write them in the little Pro Tools comment section, or like more helpfully on a lyric sheet where I can circle certain words, and I'll be like, take 7, take 8, take 9, this phrase. So I kind of have in the back of my mind, like, oh, we've got that. When my ear has instantly like had a gut reaction and gone, that is perfect. So I mark that down, and then I will know just kind of from memory almost. And I like to record section by section. So let's say we just finished the verse and I feel like we have everything except the first line. I might say, we have everything except the first line. Can we just do only the first line a few times? Again, it's the entry into the song. Like, let's try to approach it a different way. And then I might try a comp then and there with them. And then they'll say like, oh, I hear what you mean. It has less energy. You know? So I kind of, it depends on the situation. But it's also in the same scenario if we've done that for a few rounds and I feel like we're still not getting it and I'm pushing and I'm giving a lot of direction, but it's still not coming through, then I'll just probably say I'll fix it later. But also in that scenario, they usually don't notice that I think that there's something wrong. So sometimes I have to just say, okay, I'm going to let that go because it's probably not a big deal. I'm just obsessing over a small detail that they don't notice. So, okay, I'm going to let that go.
But it's hard to though, because you think, oh, like once they're gone, they're gone. And I want to make sure I have everything that I need, you know?
That's something I've learned with time, is actually have like recording as much as possible, like in as many different options and ways, so that when the label comes back to say like, oh, we were wondering if you had this take of this, I'll be like, yep, I do actually, or no, I don't. I've had it oftentimes where I haven't really done it another way.
Yeah, you have it this style, this way.
Yeah,
right?
so I've learned
the
to
A&R comes in.
Exactly.
To put their imprint.
Yeah.
That's what we were saying. Another thing we were saying off camera was you had the question about approaching like someone like a Miss Banks?
Yeah, that was interesting. Yeah, so like, how different is that working with a rapper versus a singer?
It's super different, and I always feel like nobody talks about it, but it's so different.
Mm.
And you must get this a lot if you're working in rap or on a lot
Well,
of hip-hop.
I find it alien working with a vocalist because I'm like, I don't really
like a rapper or like a singer.
like a singer.
Okay.
Yeah, like because a rapper's just like, let's go fast.
That's the
decisions on the fly.
That's
like
it.
they're not, you know what I mean. There's nowhere near
Mm-hmm.
as much detail. There's only one artist that I've ever worked with that's been like super highly on the comps, and that's Deneo. And I love him to pieces, but I had a migraine after the session because he's like, we're going through like. He will laugh, like he won't mind me saying this, but we were like 20 different U's, and it's like what you're saying, the detail. So yeah, I don't envy like the detail because I'm not like that. Do you know what I mean? I'm sort of like let's just capture the energy. Yeah.
Yeah, it's different. I mean, even the style of recording is different. I'm usually I'm reaching for a different mic in a lot of cases. Like a C800 is really good at capturing those kind of like the punchiness of everything, the transients rather. It's also very naturally like high-endy, so I don't really do much with EQ with that one. So the chain becomes different. That's one thing. Secondly, the way I record is very different in that in pop you've got like I like to record verses. Verse 1 and then verse 2 and then pre-1 and then pre-2 and then the choruses and then the middle eights and then once we do the lead vocal, it's all Compton. We do BBs and ad-libs and like it's like a machine. But with rap it's also a machine, but the process is different. You'd cut your lead or they'll do like the first 8 and then sometimes people either want to listen back to that or go straight to the next 8. So I'm making another track and then I just play, 2 bars from the last place. They're hearing themselves and then I make sure that they're rapping like the phrase before the next bit.
The tone.
Exactly.
That's a big thing
to tone match.
Changes,
And then once we've got like the whole lead down, then we go for stabs and doubles.
Yeah, because they're in the pocket and they want to make sure that they stay in that pocket.
Yeah.
So they keep in the verse.
Yeah.
They don't move on to different things.
No.
Yeah.
It's
It's
more
all about
chronological.
tone. Yeah.
Yeah.
And maintaining the same tone.
Exactly.
And once they're in, they're in. Because, I have it all the time where a rapper will come back and they're like, oh, I just really don't like the last 4 bars.
Yeah.
I want to re-record it. And I'm like, okay, well, we're probably going to re-record the whole verse.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to be able to match the
No. That's exactly it.
And it's going to sound different.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
It's actually interesting. Like the Juice World records, they all like recorded like in different places.
Yeah.
Like it sounds like every
that's
single
just
phrase.
that's just hip hop though, like these guys record all over the place. So in an ideal scenario you get them to record, but like we were saying off camera, I've got a certain project and it's like some bits are embedded in an MP3, another bit's like on here, this bit was definitely recorded in a toilet somewhere. Like you just gotta make it work.
Yeah. But also like in those scenarios I've never been afraid to ask for like the other files if it means it's gonna make the job easier. I mean sometimes they don't have them, but
that's most of the time they just give you a blank face and they're like
I don't know
what other files.
Yeah. And then if that's the answer I'm like okay cool, like let's move.
Yeah, we spoke to someone who's like couldn't talk about it on camera, but they had an amazing feature and they were like, this would have taken this track in another direction. And they had 2 vocals and one of them was great, and the other one was like so bad and unfixable. So the whole feature just went away.
Yeah, and it's like a situation where it's like that artist isn't going to re-record it. Like that's what you're getting.
That's
really like they're not in a position to ask that person.
No.
It's like
that's a big
Yeah.
It happens.
Exactly.
Yeah.
New AI plugins, maybe.
Coming off that topic a little bit again, we were speaking a bit about it off camera. It's an undeniable fact that our industry is quite male dominated. Like, there's 3 guys sitting here right now. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just one of these things.
Yeah.
What is it? How has it been like navigating the industry as like a young woman?
Love that question. It's been hard in some ways and not so hard in other ways. Not so hard because when I was coming out at Metropolis, I felt so blessed to have 3 head engineers who were just so supportive of my learning. And I think they all sort of saw something in me. At least I like to think so, guys.
They clearly did.
That, I was hopefully curious to learn and wanted to do the best job and work on sessions and be in sessions with them where I, could see myself working on the project as well. And yeah, I think in that sense, I felt like the world was my oyster, really. But obviously coming and being freelance now, it's a different, I had to navigate a few hurdles of like, do I have to extra prove myself to work on this project? You always just kind of have that self-doubt and that sort of second guessing. And it took me a long time to sort of gain any sort of self-confidence in my abilities as a result. I think I said this years ago in another interview, but my overarching feeling is that when being picked for like technical jobs, I think a lot of people, we're conditioned to just sort of,
expect a male
or believe men when they step into the room and say that they know and have done everything that they say they've done.
Like a certain authority.
Yes. And there's kind of what I've experienced with other men in the industry is like, which is a great thing to a degree, is kind of not being afraid to make a mistake. Whereas as a young woman in the industry, I feel like if I make a mistake, I'm going to be scrutinized double as hard for making that mistake. I'm not going to be taken as seriously. I'm not going to be hired again for this job if I make any sort of mistakes. I just have to be on it all the time. Whereas, I kind of have seen men in sessions just try it on, like, giving production feedback to the artists in the room when they are the runner or the assistant. It's like, dang, I wish I had, you know what I mean? Like,
that level of
I wish I had that confidence,
Yeah.
I mean, they'll get shut down instantly. But
they don't feel like there's going to be any sort of like repercussions.
Exactly.
For that.
Yeah.
Right.
And I feel like, especially coming up as a student, when I was a student anyway, I sort of kept to myself a little bit. I was afraid to ask questions and really like get a word in. But I feel like if I was to go back now with what I know about the industry, I would be asking loads more questions. I'd be, volunteering myself forward to sit on Pro Tools at an Abbey Road session. That's one of the things that we, got to do. And sort of one feeling that I've taken with me to other sessions as well. It's like, well, how come he got that job? Or like, how come he's working on that and I'm not working on that? I think I'd be really good at that, but never actually having the courage to act on that feeling, or like put myself forward. But like, again, in the back of my mind, I'm asking like, to what degree is that just me holding myself back? I can't really pinpoint a specific scenario where I've been made to feel less than or that I couldn't do
but
that
obviously
job,
it's like what you're saying about like representation. Like if you are in a room and you don't feel like you're represented, do you know what I mean? Like it's difficult to feel like my opinion is going to be valid.
That's true.
Do you know what I mean?
Like
and it's something that I was thinking about when structuring the question. Like I've never ever had to think about it ever, and it's quite. That's why it's like I think it's something that's good that it gets highlighted, and there are people like yourself that are like, clear, like at the top of their game, working as a professional. It's like it doesn't matter what the scenario is. If you're male or you're female, work is work and skill is skill.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
it's like it's just figuring out a way of breaking that down so people don't feel like
don't have that bias or
exactly, because I don't feel like necessarily obviously I'd love to say that all men, that there's no sexism, but there is, or whatever there is, but like I'd easily say every person in this room doesn't feel like that, but like but the fact is that we wouldn't even consider that you might think that at one point.
I mean, you always, because people do always have, there's conscious and unconscious bias, which is a bit like what you were saying, which is there's
that's the right way of
like political leaders don't have provincial accents. you know, they tend to sort of look a certain way, carry themselves a certain way. It's because we have these biases like,
Yeah,
oh,
that's
he's been
who
to a
leader
good
is,
school,
yeah.
Yes.
maybe he'll fix the economy.
Yeah.
It's like,
It's like,
well,
what? Yeah.
you
Says
know.
who? Yeah, exactly.
So if you're going into those environments and people want, often from an engineer want a safe pair of hands
Exactly.
or things like that, it's like, oh, they need to feel
Yeah.
at peace.
Yeah, are they expecting a guy mid-40s, you know, like, you know, that's like what, like this, like,
This
again,
guy's really
we were-
old. It's going to be great.
Yeah, we were talking about earlier, if you watch a Hollywood film
Yeah.
and it's an engineer, it's a white old guy behind the desk. That's what it is. Do you know what I mean? But that actually, in reality, that's not what it is, and that's not what it looks like. And if you know, if there's a change to be made there, I think it's that, and then that's going to enable people to be more comfortable and you know, more people like yourself to take the jump and get into the industry. Because, you know, you saying, oh, you had the fear to maybe not say what you wanted to say.
Yeah.
You know, there's going to be people that don't even have the confidence to even give it a go.
Yeah.
Do you know?
That's totally
So
it. Unless they see themselves
being able to do it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Another thing on that note is, you know, I think there are actually a lot of women in this industry, but a lot of these women are artists that have multiple talents. You have people like Rosalia, Ariana Grande, Victoria Monet. They've engineered their own vocals. They know how to use Pro Tools. They sit on Pro Tools all day and comp themselves, you know, but we just don't see it. You know, you don't see it as much. We don't see them as, you know, we kind of almost view them as artists, but they're so multi-talented. They're producers, they've engineered. You know, I want more like up and coming female artists to step into the production roles a little bit more.
Yeah.
Which you
exposure,
naturally, which you naturally do already when you're creating your own music as an artist. But I think, like, you know, we need to really be encouraging these women to step into that production role and, you know, do that bit of writing and like put in a couple of the wet stems that they've done on their own at home. Like, you know what I mean? Just get them those credits.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I think it's important, you know, and it's like, again, it's like, you know, it's a different perspective on things. It's a different approach to things. And, you know, as a female vocal producer, you're probably more in line and more in the headspace of working with a female artist than maybe a male would be, because just like normal things like tone and range and stuff like that, like that's your ballpark. So like you're going to be better equipped to deal with those scenarios. Do you know what I mean? Anyway, just from a skill point of view.
Yeah.
You know, to play to your strengths.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's how I feel. I mean, very proudly, a lot of the artists, well, I want to say like 99% of the artists that I work with are women and women of color.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just think that even just having me in the room with them kind of breaks a barrier, breaks a tension that maybe they've had in other rooms, and they just instantly feel comfortable with me because they're like, oh, she gets it. Like, this is my girl, you know?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
We've got this down.
Studio can be an intimidating place. So,
For sure. You
yeah.
need someone that can just level with you.
Again, representation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Being
think
able
so.
just to, I can relate to that person and see that.
Yeah.
Obviously, in an ideal world, no one would need that. Everyone gets along and no
Yeah.
one feels
Of course.
alienated in any
Yeah.
way. But like, that's not the world that we live in. So yeah, we need it. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? It's important. That's cool. I'm glad I asked you the question.
Thanks.
On that note as well, what are we doing for time as well?
I think we're just about time to wrap up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to give you two questions then, and we'll try and run through it.
Okay.
There's one I want to know, and obviously I can tell that you're a little bit of you like your gear, but we're going to remove the gear from the scenario.
Okay.
And if you were only in the box,
Okay.
and you had the choice, you could only use one EQ, a compressor, and a reverb, what would you use?
Valhalla for the reverb, vintage verb all the way, all the time.
Yeah, shout out.
I mean, guys, I use stock EQ, the stock Pro Tools EQ. Okay, okay, maybe the Pultec if I had to like pick
Right.
in the box. Otherwise, I'm just using the Pro Tools EQ7
Because it's there.
because it's there, but it's great. Like I'm so used to using it. I love it. What was the other one? Compressor.
Yeah, compressor, yeah.
In the I mean, there's two. I mean, a lot of the times, because I don't have one, I'll put a Fairchild on like a vocal bus at the end of everything. If I'm like,
Well, they don't have Fairchild. at the studio.
We can lend you some.
Yeah.
Just two.
We do have one at the studio, but I'm
You
saying
pull them up. They got everything else.
we do actually have one. But if I'm sat at home, I mean, you said remove the gear from the
I'm playing
equation.
with you.
So yeah,
Funny you picked two like modeling plugins, you know. Like,
Yeah, that's it. You're a gearhead.
the Fairchild, the Pultec, and probably a CL1B. I mean, I have got one at the studio as well. But again, if I didn't, I mean, I'm gonna. This is so funny because in the box, I'm picking things that I would pick out of the box if I had it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. Well,
So-
it's obviously because that's you like out of the box.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
And then the last question before we wrap up, sort of a double-barreled question. If you had the opportunity to speak to your younger self, and then everyone else listening, what advice would you give them, knowing what you know now?
This is so cliche, but it's still so. It's going to be so true.
It's a
every single
cliche
time I
question.
say it,
But yeah.
Fair play. Probably to just embrace the confidence in my personality sooner in my career, because I spent way too long self-doubting and thinking that I wasn't gonna do very well, or that other people were better than me at certain things without before I'd even stepped out and tried. And I probably would have handled a lot of situations in the studio environment better as well, as a runner, as an assistant, what have you. I feel like I would have been a better asset as an assistant to people if I had a bit more self-confidence and just didn't doubt my setups, didn't doubt, what we were doing on the day or my own capabilities. And usually, especially with troubleshooting, whatever I would assume it was, typically I'd be right, even though I've not said anything out loud because I was afraid to be wrong. So I think just really embracing that confidence and would have really helped me go a little bit further had I harnessed it sooner.
Amazing. Yeah. That's great. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah. And we'll have your stuff plugged underneath so people can find out all your great music that you worked
Awesome.
on, and maybe have an opportunity to reach out to you, the next Matt Taylor or something.
Gosh, he's going to love that you said that.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Ramira, for coming on.
Thank you.
And on that note, you've been watching and listening to the Audio Movers podcast. Please make sure you like and subscribe and all of the good stuff, and we will catch you guys in the next one. Safe.
Nice one.